Okay, so let's talk about group instances. What are groups? What are group instances? Well, first of all, let's make sure that we can know the difference between an instance, a group instance, and another kind of duplicate of a mesh. First of all, if we go over here and we just add a UV sphere and we alt duplicate that, Alt D, right? We can edit both of these meshes together, right? They both share the same mesh over here, right? We talked about that in another video. So now that I have two different objects, if I add a modifier to one of these objects, let's just say I add a mirror modifier to it and go into mesh mode, and let's just split those up, right? So now you can see I moved the mesh, so it updated only the mesh of this. It didn't update and add a new modifier, right? So that is different. It's a totally separate situation. If I add an array to this guy, for example, then that is going to be a different modifier on a different object, even though the mesh data is the same between them, right? And so there's also a delay when you update it as well, which is something to take a note of. Now, when we look at what a group instance is, a group instance is first of all, you make a group out of an object or a series of objects. You can start with one, and then over here in this layer I have groups, copies of this object here. Okay. And so the way it works for the group instances, since these are copies at the object level, when you move the object, it also moves the group instance. Okay, and also when you add modifiers to it, for example, like an array, right? It also arrays these instances. Okay, so now the reason these are doing what they're doing here is because I had rotated these group instances. All right, and I will get to that in a second. So the next thing we can do is put the cursor to center. Let me just move the cursor out. Let's move the cursor out over here, and then let's add a mesh cylinder. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this mesh cylinder to this group, right? So the way I'll do that is select this and go over here to the object panel, and under add to group, I'll select the group that I have already, which is I believe group. Nope, actually it's excuse me, not that one. It's copy 01. There we go. So that's the group that I have for these guys. Okay, and so now you can see it updated and added this object to that group. All right, and since they were already rotated, the group instance is oriented in that rotation. So let me show you how that's set up. All right, so let's go to a new layer. So put the cursor back to center, and now I'm going to add a cube. Okay, and what I want to do is move the cube out here because I'm going to rotate it, right, like I did the other ones. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add it to a group. In this case, I'm going to make a new one for this, and we're just going to call this toot for tutorial. All right, so that's fine. So now notice what's going to happen here. If I have the cursor in different positions, because if you know about Shift A, right, when you add something in, it will go to wherever the cursor is. So let's just do that real quick. So where you find group instances is in the add menu. You go all the way down here to group instance, and we did toot, so we do that. See, now you notice it put the group at the center of the cursor, and notice how this was moved. So what it's doing is it's basically saying that it's considering this initial group to have a center of 0. So let's delete that. Let's put the cursor back back to the center. All right, and so we got this guy here. Right, now let's go add group instance toot. Now it made a copy exactly right there because it put the center at 0. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to rotate this guy on the X 90. Okay, so now when I'm moving this way, it's moving that one down, right? So that's how that works. Now, just as an illustration for the setup, now I'm gonna just make a Shift D copy of this, and then I'm gonna go rotate X 90 again, and do it again, and oops, rotate on the X 90 again, and now I'm gonna make 2 more. Rotate on the Y 90, and rotate on the Y 180. Helps if it actually takes my input. Y 180. There we go. Alright, so now we have the same setup I had before. So that, as you can see, this is a group instance, but it has its own object attributes, meaning in the transform panel here, it's rotated. So that means it has another orientation. Put this to local, you can see this has a different orientation than this one, and that one, and that one, and that one, and the original. So if I'm moving this out this way, they're all going to expand outwards from that center. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can do with this, but this is just one example of interesting kind of an array you can have, right? So now, since we can add things to this instance, we can add it to the group here, and it will propagate or copy itself to all the instances. Let's do something like, let's add a lamp, add a point lamp, and let's put it over here so we can see it. And then let's take this and add that to our toot group, and then it automatically updates over here. And also, these meshes can be updated in real time as well. So anything you add to the mesh, anything you duplicate to the mesh, can duplicate, right? And then if you add a modifier to it, let's take this whole thing, just kind of move this around. Now let's add a modifier here. Like I did before, modifier mirror. Okay, and so now I've got a mirror of it. And so as you can see, it automatically updated, right? So also the mesh updates in real time as well, whereas with duplicates it doesn't necessarily update right away when you have modifiers on there. See, did I do that on the other layer here? Yeah, so if you notice here, I got a modifier, mirror modifier on this, and this is updating in real time. But notice this other mesh, this other object has this same mesh data, but it's not updating in real time until I go back into object mode, and then now it updates these meshes. Whereas this example, excuse me, right here, yeah, this one does it all in real time, even if there's a modifier on there. So that's just something to make a note of. But that's the basic idea of it. The basic idea is that you make a group instance, you can then transform these instances around in a scene, and simply by adding things to the original group, you can add more to the scene. Okay, so that's how it works.